Hey everybody, this is Dr. Ben Pearl. I am here with Dr. Pat Agnew, a colleague of mine who I consider a mentor. You've taught me a lot about children's foot deformities, a lot about just understanding regenerative medicine. We've had several conversations together. But today, with this glorious backdrop of the Cavalier Hotel, we're going to talk a little bit of military medical history vis-a-vis the Navy. Dr. Agnew is a 20-year veteran of the Navy as a captain. He is also founder of the Eastern Virginia Medical School Podiatric Residency, and so glad that we can share this afternoon together. We've shared a lot of good times, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of your stories from the classic period that you're aware of with podiatrists in the military.
Well, it's awfully kind of you to consider me a mentor, definitely a colleague. I'll admit that in all the teaching I do, I actually benefit more from the teaching than the student probably does. You know, if you really want to try to understand something, try and explain it to somebody else, then you get a much deeper depth of knowledge. And like with our residents, I ask a lot of questions, a lot of Socratic method. They think that's because I already know the answer, but not always. Sometimes I'm just trying to pick their brains.
I love that.
So it's really an honor to be able to talk about some history of military podiatry. There's so much there. I'm getting older. I'm going to start forgetting stuff pretty soon. So having it recorded in any format's a good start. And I'm hoping this will be an impetus, little seed for others who watch this to say, hey, I've got a story too, and maybe one day somebody will write it all down. Maybe that's what I'll do when I retire one day.
So start out with your direct disciple, Dr. James Ganley.
Yeah, so Dr. Ganley was drafted into the United States Navy early in his career. He was already a podiatrist, and really the Navy didn't quite know what to do with podiatrists at that time. He had the opportunity to be commissioned as an officer in the relatively newly formed Medical Service Corps, but he would have had almost entirely administrative duties. He was offered the other option of becoming an enlisted man, but working in clinic as a corpsman. That's what we call medical assistants in the Navy, although they have a lot more responsibilities than that. Everything from the very basic orderly type duties to doing surgery on submarines as independent duty corpsmen, whom I helped train over at the Naval Hospital in Philadelphia when I was still in the service. So Dr. Ganley chose the latter, and he worked with an orthopedic surgeon at Philadelphia Naval Hospital. I believe his name was Dr. Bundens, and really was one of the pioneers of surgical podiatry and more comprehensive foot and ankle care. And he took that knowledge out into his private practice after he finished his responsibility to the nation, and started operating on children at the state hospital in Penhurst outside Philadelphia. Learned all there was to know about children's feet, neurologic diseases, degenerative neuromuscular diseases. It was quite an education for him, which he went on to share with all of us as one of the founders of the American College of Foot and Ankle Pediatrics.
Now you had some particularly notable things that you picked up with your training with him. I call them Ganleyisms. Maybe share a couple of them. It could be more general to medicine and learning and dealing with colleagues, or something specific in the OR, a technique.
Made a lot of little, I'm trying to construct a list from memory of those things that he said that were real pearls. My residents tease me. They say I'm like a bumper sticker or a fortune cookie because I've got a little bromide or a saying for almost every situation at this point. After 48 years of doing it, or 38 years of doing this, sometimes it feels like 48, but usually about 38. Well, I'll give you an example. He always said that if the student doesn't surpass the master, then the master has failed. And I don't know if that was his original, but it was a good one. Lots of other ones that probably have been shared around, like the 80-20 rule. 80% of your effort goes into 20% of your work. So some of the smaller number of your patients require the maximum of your effort, and just there's so many.
As far as what you're using now in your practice, was serial casting one of the biggest things for conservative care that you took away from him for pediatric deformities? What would you identify as one of the biggest things that influenced how you practice today?
Well, pathomechanics in general. However we were to approach them, just recognizing or trying to tease out normal versus abnormal in a child. There are certainly published numbers for ranges of motion and things like that, but often it comes down to more of a gestalt. Is that particular child not really fitting the pattern you think they should for that age, that level of development? And so he took us through detailed evaluation of the infant. He published so many papers, but that's one of them. And I've tried to kind of reproduce that a little bit in different lectures. And then we talk about all kinds of different treatments appropriate to the patient. The tragic aspect of pediatrics, I was talking about this at our state meeting yesterday across the street, is the lack of good data on outcomes and what's best for the child. A lot of people will tell you that they know what's best for the child, but I've read just about everything written on children's feet for decades, and I sure don't know the answers. I know what I don't know, and I know I think it's tantamount to be honest with families about the fact that this is almost anecdotal. We can't tell that mom how her kid's going to turn out. But then you look at the mom, and if she's just had her bunion operation, and the pediatrician's telling the family that the child's going to outgrow those overpronated feet, and they're 6 or 7 years old by then, I'll say, yeah, probably not, and maybe we should try to intervene constructively.
Yeah, that's why I've always sort of considered you with your philosophy and how you deal with patients and families as kind of a modern Mark Twain of sorts, and you got the wisp of hair and the twinkle in your eye to
I may grow it all out, get real curly.
Yeah. So you had a lot of other anecdotes, just some quick ones about some interesting military tidbits that maybe you can share a few of those as well.
Well, I don't have any of the details, and I hope someone will fill these in as soon as possible, but the recently deceased E. Dalton Montgomery was in the, I understand, Georgia National Guard, Army National Guard, and rose to the rank of Brigadier General, and I think that's a one-off.
Telling me that this particularly historic Cavalier Hotel is designated in this pool room as a particularly historic place.
There's a whole lot of history in this place, but since we're talking about military and medicine later, this particular spot, the swimming pool, was used as a training site for radar operators during World War II. Being below where munitions might escape and spies would be able to figure out what's going on. So pretty cool, huh?
Yeah. I also understand, and I don't know if this had anything to do with the history of military engagements, but there was a train that came right through, and I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, right in front of the Cavalier here.
I hadn't heard about the train.
Yep, and this, as we know, several presidents stayed here as well.
Yeah, I think 6 or 7 presidents. Adolf Kors died here. They say his ghost still roams around, and Beyonce's been here. It's
pretty impressive place.
Cool hotel. Yep.
Right here in Virginia Beach. Other anecdotes that you were going to share with us, some notable military things.
Wow, there's so many, and I hope maybe we can tag on a list at some point of the ones that I'm aware of, and that'll expand to include others. But one story that I recently verified with Dr. Sonia Courage, who was a lieutenant, United States Navy, podiatrist, and I feel kind of responsible for what happened to her to a certain extent. Because I, at the time, was working at the Pentagon, and I was in plans, operations, and medical intelligence, and one of the things we were working on was manning out forward area platforms, places where a podiatrist could be useful in or close to a combat zone.
Sure.
So she wound up getting deployed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, and was in a convoy headed up to Baghdad across the desert when they were ambushed, and she dismounted from her vehicle and returned fire at the enemy. And as far as I know, she is the only podiatrist who was acting as a podiatrist that did that. Now, some other stories, there are, and she's fine. She didn't get wounded or anything, but that I think deserves a combat action ribbon, and certainly with some recognition of the valor involved in. I mean, it's one thing to get shot at; it's another thing to shoot back. And I was always very impressed with Dr. Courage, and a little bit feeling guilty about putting her in that situation.
I got one to share with you.
Fire away. Yeah.
Dr. Agnew, I at the time was at the VA in Philly, and then the residency director, Dr. Ann Sinoga, had some communications with Dr. Agnew, and we ended up with a rotation at the base, and I got to learn a little bit about how military medicine worked, and maybe you can point out some of his accomplishments of what he brought into the podiatry space in the Air Force.
Well, he really broke a ceiling there. He was one of the few who've risen to the rank of 06, which in the Air Force is a full bird colonel. The Navy, it's a captain. And he was at one point the director of the Department of Orthopedics at Langley Naval Hospital, or Langley Air Force Hospital up the road from us here in Hampton. So pretty huge accomplishment, and again, kind of groundbreaking, getting us further and further into leadership positions. So.
Yep. Well, with this drone we've got, I'm reminded it's 2025.
I think we're photobombed by a wedding here. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Wow. So we'll wrap it with this. 2025. I notice in my practice I see a lot of patients that have been through the military wearing traditional combat boots, and I just can't understand the equation with how this breaks their body with, I guess, a 50-pound rucksack. Maybe you
more.
Please enlighten us with how that happens, and some personal anecdotes that you might have had in your basic training.
So it seems like we're always about one war behind in terms of footwear. The very basic combat boots of World War II went into Korea, and in the cold environment, a whole lot of guys damaged their feet, including my godfather, who was in the OSS, the precursor to the CIA in Korea, and had his feet just about frozen. Has permanent nerve damage, and he used to get up in the morning and stomp his feet to try and get the feeling back in him.
Then they end up with a disability rating, right? And the foot is about
probably
the full equation is about 10% if they get the full, or is that?
That's often the case. Yeah, about 10%. But that's for things like bunions, flat feet, plantar fasciitis, heel spurs, things that might come up early in your enlistment, or after you've become an asset. Once you've been through some basic training, you haven't had any symptoms. Later on in your career, if you have those kind of injuries, sometimes that qualifies you for a disability rating with the Department of Veterans Affairs later on. Other cases like that, well, going into Vietnam, they were still wearing like World War II combat boots, but they had other hazards like punji sticks, which are a man trap. It's a hole cut in the ground with sharpened bamboo stakes stuck in it. Step into it, get sliced up, and it's very clever for the enemy to do this, because you really don't necessarily want to kill your enemy, but if you disable him, then two guys have to carry him back. So you take three people off the battlefield.
It's tactical.
Yeah, and they developed these steel shank jungle boots later during Vietnam. It was a very long war, we carried out into the desert. And those steel shanks became like a microwave oven on the hot sand. So later on, desert boots were developed, and It's gotten more sophisticated now, but yeah, we're always about one more behind on foot gear.
And certainly we know that just from a hygienic standpoint and some of the microbes that can grow within the shoe, much less, when you're in extreme environments and humidity and.
Well, I've heard that the actual disease, onychomycosis, really wasn't recognized in the United States before World War I, when people returned from wet, hot trenches, cold trenches, and they had all of a sudden this disease in their toenails. And so that was kind of a new thing, probably brought home by the military.
At the trench foot.
And there's been a sudden appearance of microorganisms from the 20-year-long war in Afghanistan, where we have Acinetobacter baumannii. Wasn't really in our antimicrobiogram until after guys started coming back from Afghanistan. So.
You have a personal anecdote of an injury you sustained while you were maybe being a little more gung-ho, or just
a little silly, I guess. I was doing an obstacle course. And,
how high are these obstacle courses?
Well, that particular obstacle was a 10-foot wall, which I would sling my rifle, and I was only wearing a 3-day pack, which is a lot lighter than a full rucksack. Climbed up, got to the top, and you're probably supposed to drop your legs down and hold by your fingertips and then drop. But I thought I'd just jump right off the top of it and attempt a parachute landing fall.
I saw the SEALs doing it, so.
Yeah, sure, right? They do it. Why can't I,
Yeah.
But I was in my 40s at this point.
Oh, wow.
And hit the ground. Well, actually, I was 39. I hit the ground. I shattered my medial meniscus. It didn't really hurt at that time, but I noticed less and less ability to flex my knee. So I eventually went to my colleague, A.J. DeStasio, also a former naval medical officer, orthopedic surgeon, and he's scoping my knee, and I stayed awake to watch him, and I said, so what do you think? Can you fix it? And he just laughed at me and said, no, sucking the whole thing out, but you'll be fine. And I went on to do one more triathlon after that. I had been doing several triathlons every summer for about 10 years. And I said, well, I'm going to do one more just to see if I can. And I did that, and it didn't hurt too bad, but I decided I'd probably only run if I'm being chased from now on. So I spent a lot of time in the water. Pretty much surf every day.
Any other last anecdotes you want to share before we close out?
Gosh, there are so many military stories, and
we can have people put them in comments
I
here.
really hope people will comment on things like Ray Fritz in the United States Navy SEALs. I've got a list that I've already shared with Ben, many of which I've verified. Al Rulon deploying with the Marines during Desert Storm, or actually he was OIF, he was on Operation Iraqi Freedom.
So I'm gonna list. I'm gonna have you send them to me, and we'll put them in the description. I'll just cut and paste them right in the description here under this video.
Cool. Yeah, this history needs to be told and recorded.
Yeah. Listen, Patrick, I really appreciate it. You've been a colleague and a friend, going back to when I took a look at a practice down the street from you, and you were nice enough to open up your home to me, and you've been a consistent friend through the years, and you can't say that about, unfortunately, every colleague, but this guy here is one of the good ones, so I really appreciate your being a colleague and our friendship.
It's been a privilege. One thing about little kids is they don't straighten out their knee at the right time.
They walk a little lockstep. Yeah. No, kids are always interesting and fun to work with. Hey Robert, it's been a couple years. Tell me something fun about this hotel.
Great. Well, lots of good history here. We've had 10 presidents, John Kennedy among them, Eisenhower, Truman, Coolidge, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter.
And how long have you been here?
I'm into my 8th year. It's been a wonderful whirlwind of an experience.
I'm sure it has been. And who's the most recent president to stay at the Cavalier?
None since Jimmy Carter.
None since Jimmy.
Jimmy's the last. Coolidge was the first.
That's a shame, because those guys really did appreciate history. I guess Bill Clinton never made it here. But let me ask you this. Something interesting about the Kennedy years here? Anything that you can share? Or
Elizabeth Taylor also stayed in the hotel back in the day, and I understand that the gentleman who delivered room service almost dropped his tray. He was so nervous.
Oh wow! She was quite the stunning actress, a real starlet.
unbelievable.
Back when stars were stars, right?
Absolutely. Doris Day also stayed here. Of course, she was born in 1822, just passed away at the ripe old age of about 95 or thereabout, about a year and a half or two ago.
And one of the Rat Pack himself, Frank Sinatra.
There you go.
Yeah. Well,
He did it his way.
He sure did.